They know not what they do. We weren't smart. I mean, smoking was healthy for you at one point, and polluting the
Doctor
rivers was,
recommended, yes.
yeah, polluting rivers was the way. They thought, oh, it'll regenerate itself. It'll take care of it.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. But that we didn't know any better. So I think sometimes people look harshly on the past, thinking, how not smart we were, but it was just the times. So I think healing that trauma too, and just moving forward instead of like pointing fingers to blame. Just like how can we move forward and make it better, not repeat that mistake, or how do we even improve our improvements? you know.
Well, Lisa, that just reminds me of the statement like know better, do better. You know,
Yep.
so I think of it along that line were like canned vegetables, which you know which were great, like in the
Really worked.
60s and 70s when I was a kid, but then realizing now that I would like never buy a canned vegetable if I could help it, like I'm gonna buy fresh and whatever. So, it was kind of like what was in fashion and no one knew better.
So you want to know the truth? I had canned corn for dinner last night. And I think the main reason that I do, I mean, I always get these little cans of corn and prepared mushrooms. Although I cook it all from scratch almost every single day, so it takes me an hour every evening to make my dinner between the knife work and the preparation of the gazintas, which I call the little sub assemblies that make the whole thing really really kind of special. But I agree with you. Were it not for canned food, my family of 8 people in the 1960s and 70s would probably never have eaten.
Exactly.
So let's explore the difference between having a wise saying to examine and then experiencing wisdom as a result of it. Um, and I'll ask this rhetorical question because I don't know if anybody is really tuned in to like the 3 million Navajos that live on the reservation or at the Four Corners, or the other Native Americans now that also have all of those really marvelous sayings that regard all of us as one. It's like every advanced religion, in my opinion, the Buddhists, the Native Americans, they all believe that we're all part of a super system, and nobody stands apart from it. Which I think is brilliant. I really do. And how many of them actually can put that into practice in their daily lives? How many of us can put that into practice in our daily lives?
We can all put it into practice. The thing is, even now, we don't really know any better now than we did 7 generations ago. We've learned, but we don't know what we don't know. So every decision you're making right now is going to have second and third order consequences. you know
Yeah.
so like the heartfelt business really resonates with me because that's been my mission for 30 years, and there are a lot of heartfelt decisions and beliefs that broke when stress tested by humans being humans. And oh, this is we're going to be one big happy family, and then someone isn't, and they're selfish, or you screw up and people get hurt. And so now it's kind of like what Lisa was saying. Where's the like for me, I'm like caught up in this idea of navigating. If you teach people how to more effectively navigate based on the result, whether the consequence was good, bad, intended, or unintended, now at least you can continue to have like movement and evolution. But isn't it interesting? I mean, yeah, so Elon Musk wants to go to Mars. What if 3 generations from now that results in the destruction of the planet? He's not intending that. He doesn't mean that to happen, but what he doesn't know that it won't. So at some point, you have to be able to look at where you are and navigate towards, you know, that resolution. It struck me as you were talking about Buddhism because one of the tenets of that is bodhicitta, which is pretty much, your intention is to look beyond yourself to the greater good of all sentient beings and to serve that first and foremost.
Hmm.
And they recognize most people aren't doing that. They're not even where they could do that. They're in that mode of, you know, self-preservation, self-cultivation, whatever it is. I'm not, there's no judgment here. It's just where we are in our place. But where we are in that perspective influences our decisions, and that is going to make it very difficult to achieve some semblance of altruistic balance, I guess you could say. So it feels like the wisdom you acquire is by making what you think is a good decision, having it turn out in a way that may or may not be what you thought it was going to be, and then how do you move from that, and how do the people around you align or not align with how you move through that, you know? It's complicated. It's probably why we're all so messed up.
Well, it's the dance. It's really the
Yeah,
dance, and everybody gets tired of other people messing up their experiments, you know? I'm supposed to be doing this, and it's supposed to yield this result over here. And I think it's powerful what you're saying, because the folks that are awake and have decided what they want to do with their lives, like, I know people that knew when they were 5 or 6 years old they were going to be firemen, and they did it, or going to be a school teacher, or going to be a nurse or a doctor, and they did it. And then there are, like, the most of the rest of us, we just kind of like bounced off of things for a while and ended up falling into something that seemed like it was, you know, less dangerous than other things, and had a pretty good group of people that were, semi heading in the same direction. And at the same time, if I were objectively looking at all of the wise things that, like, for instance, that come out of the Navajo traditions. Um, I bought books. My wife's bought books. We're real interested in all of it. But along with that, they have one of the highest rates of obesity and, of disease related to obesity and alcoholism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And wouldn't it be cool if somehow they could spontaneously just get reconnected to 7 generations back and 7 generations forward? Not like there's a particular, um, difference in them. I think it's what they're experiencing is true for most cultures across humanity, that are in similar circumstances. I think you see those kinds of things breaking down, in poorer countries in Africa and places where their resources are not readily available, like the way they are for us that live near cities and that sort of thing. Well, I just think, the idea of you struck me with this, the 7 generation thinking and living, and the whole idea of a legacy, not a legacy that you're leaving, but the legacy you're passing on. You know, the legacy that lives on through us in our daily lives as we go about our business, and that might have a little bit of, assistance in terms of telling people these things that you're doing, to your body that are not healthy for you. You might want to take a look at that. This is not something that you want to be your generational legacy to the next 3 or 4 generations. This is something that's correctable through behavior and through choice. And what if it were correctable, through behavior and choice? And I talk about these folks not because there's anything in particular about them, but I see that being a doable size for transformation for a group of people in a culture. Does that make sense?
I
yeah,
think that would work. I mean, well, I was watching something not that long ago, and they were talking about the way our diets have changed has resulted in adult diseases affecting children.
Yes.
So if we could stop doing that and then looking 2 to 3 generations out where we could reverse that process
Hmm.
by us eating healthier and and passing that down to the generation that is in age the age group to have children, and so that it starts younger instead of we just figured this one out. I didn't know about. I mean, you kind of knew every to me it seems like every decade or so there's new information about it, and it's probably changing daily. Actually, it's not even every decade, but as to
Yeah,
what's good for your body, and I know it changes, and you have to figure out what's good for you. But we all know, like the more whole a food can be that you eat is the better thing. And I the thing I've said lately to people is you can eat whatever you want as long as you make it yourself
right.
from scratch. So, I
I
mean, I
think
think go ahead.
so. No, I was going to say a telltale sign is that, when they start to do studies and children born now will not live as long as their parents. And that is, that's always scary to me because for years and years, I mean, it was the reverse that, children born were going to outlive their parents because in general, the thought was that people were healthy, the newer generations were healthier. And just the fact that it's now reversing to me says something. That and the fact that for me, I see it reflected in the animal world where animals get the same diseases we get now.
Yeah.
Where their diabetes rates are just as high, their cancer rates are higher, if not higher. And you sit there and you think to yourself, well, you know, they're around people with poor habits or poor lifestyle habits, which are then affecting them, and so you well, it's true, as my friend said to me, they're not standing in the drive-through at McDonald's, the dog's not behind the wheel, you know.
And yet I've seen people buy a Big Mac and feed it to their retriever. It's like what? Yeah,
Exactly.
no wonder they're getting sick, ladies and gentlemen. They're using the same food techniques you are.
Exactly.
I think it's really powerful to think of that. And the other thing that you mentioned too, um, it applies especially so to folks on the reservation, where most of their foodstuffs for 50 or 60 years came from the federal government. There was nobody, bringing in truckloads of fresh fruit and vegetables and all that sort of thing. No, these were 50-pound bags of flour and lard. And guess what? One of the most, traditional things, and it's now the same in other territories around the Pacific and Hawaii and that sort of fry bread. Are you familiar with fry bread? It's a little bit different than fried dough, when you go to the boardwalk at the beach. And it's probably got just the same amount of lard calories in it as well. But that becomes a staple and a mainstay. I got to talk to Elon. I think we can fix this. I really do. Mars shot is a good idea, but let's go to the four corners and let's make life different, better, and livable, like survivable, for 3.5 million folks that are there. I don't know. What do you think? It seems doable to me.
I think just as we're talking about it, it just struck me another Buddhist connection, just because I have a couple of people that I've been talking to that are kind of, connected into that world. And they were talking about, I think this speaks to the wisdom part again. So
Yeah.
you have a monk, it's in a very controlled environment, where, they're reading the Dharma every day, they're doing their meditations, da, 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 da. Then they come over to the West and they lose their minds. Like completely, they're exposed to an environment where you would think, oh, they'll just float through. They won't experience attachment or this or that. But it's all of these things, these variables that they've never had to deal with that all of a sudden are present. And some of them do not do well in that environment at all. Like, it gets pretty bad. So, and I was kind of fascinated by that. And I'm sure it's not all of them, but it's just once again being aware. So you reach out to Elon, you say, "Hey, let's fix this." But then you go in and what are all of the variables that you can't account for? And what I'm always very vigilant against is if you've experienced some success in and you're trying to translate that, you may have some assumptions that you make and blind spots as to how simple it will be
Yes.
to just do it again in this new environment without and you don't